Get this tacky old woman out of my grandson's party before she embarrasses us again, my daughter-in-law said into the microphone, while two security guards turned to look at me in front of nearly 50 guests at the country club ballroom, and my own son lowered his eyes like he didn't know me. I stood there holding a navy blue gift bag with silver tissue paper trembling slightly in my hands while the room fell into the kind of silence that only comes when people realize they are witnessing something deeply cruel but don't know whether to pretend they didn't hear it. The birthday banner behind the dessert table read "Happy 8th Birthday Noah" in giant gold letters, and for one painful second, I found myself staring at the crooked end because I couldn't bear to look at my family. I had spent 3 weeks preparing for that afternoon. 3 weeks searching antique stores across Hartford for the pocket watch Noah had admired during one of our quiet afternoons together last fall. My late husband Walter had carried that silver watch every day for 40 years tucked carefully into the breast pocket of his wool coats, and before he passed away from heart failure, he told me that one day it should belong to our grandson. Noah had looked at it with wide blue eyes and whispered, "It feels like treasure." I wanted to see that look on his face again. I arrived 20 minutes early wearing a pale cream sweater set and pearl earrings Walter bought me during our 30th anniversary trip to Charleston. The country club parking lot was already packed with luxury SUVs and shiny black sedans. Through the ballroom windows, I could see children running beneath strings of white balloons while servers carried trays of miniature cheeseburgers and lemonade in crystal dispensers. Vanessa loved expensive displays. She treated every family event like a magazine photo shoot. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed the photographer first. Then the giant custom backdrop with Noah's face printed across it beside the words Noah's All-Star Birthday Experience. It looked less like a child's party and more like a campaign event. Vanessa stood near the dessert table in a fitted white pantsuit, holding a champagne flute, while several women circled around her admiring the decorations. Her smile disappeared the second she saw me. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly, though not quietly enough. I forced a small smile. "I'm here for Noah's birthday." She glanced at the gift bag in my hands like it offended her personally. "You should have asked first." Asked first. The words settled heavily into my chest. 8 years ago, I sat in a hospital waiting room for 17 hours while Noah fought through complications after birth. I rocked him to sleep when Vanessa said she was too exhausted. I paid for his preschool tuition the year Ethan's business nearly collapsed. Yet suddenly I needed permission to attend my own grandson's birthday party. Before I could answer, Noah spotted me from across the room. "Grandma Helen," he shouted, sprinting toward me with his untied sneakers slapping against the polished floor. He wrapped his small arms around my waist so tightly I nearly lost my balance. "You came." I kissed the top of his sandy blonde hair and felt tears sting behind my eyes. "Of course I came, sweetheart." Vanessa's jaw tightened immediately. She walked over quickly, placing one manicured hand on Noah's shoulder. "Honey, go play with your friends for a minute." "But Grandma brought me something," he protested. "Later," she snapped softly. Noah looked confused, but slowly wandered back toward the arcade stations set up near the ballroom entrance. I watched him disappear into the crowd while Vanessa leaned closer to me. "You weren't invited because you make people uncomfortable," she said with a cold smile that never touched her eyes. "Please don't create a scene today." I looked around for Ethan, hoping maybe my son would finally say something. Finally remember who raised him after Walter worked double shifts for 20 years. I found him near the bar pretending to study his phone. He never once looked up. The humiliation spread slowly through me, heavy and suffocating. Then Vanessa turned toward the stage where the DJ stood preparing announcements. She lifted the microphone casually, almost elegantly, and laughed lightly before saying the words that would follow me. For months afterward. "Security," she said brightly. "Could someone please escort this tacky old woman out before she ruins Noah's party?" I heard several gasps. One woman actually whispered, "Oh my God." The security guards hesitated at first. I think even they understood something was terribly wrong. But Vanessa pointed directly at me while maintaining that polished social smile she used for charity galas and church fundraisers. One guard approached carefully. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "maybe it's best if we step outside." My face burned so hot I thought I might faint. Across the room, phones slowly lifted into the air. People were recording. Ethan finally looked up then, but only for a second. He saw me standing there clutching Noah's gift while strangers stared at me like I was some unstable intruder, and then he looked away again. That hurt more than anything else. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though the country club was only 12 miles from my neighborhood. I kept both hands tightly on the steering wheel while the untouched gift bag sat upright in the passenger seat beside me like a silent accusation. At one red light, I noticed my fingers trembling so badly that I had to place them flat against my lap just to steady them. The security guard had not touched me. He had simply opened the ballroom doors and stepped aside while everyone watched me walk out carrying the silver pocket watch that was supposed to belong to my grandson someday. No one stopped me. Not Ethan. Not a single member of my family. The late afternoon sun stretched across the highway in pale orange streaks, and all I could think about was Noah's face when Vanessa pulled him away from me. Confused, hurt, embarrassed. Children understand more than adults like to believe. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had turned gray with approaching rain. My little white colonial house looked especially quiet that evening. Walter used to leave the porch light on whenever I drove somewhere alone after dark because he worried about me tripping on the front steps. Even after 38 years of marriage, he still worried. I sat in the car for several minutes staring at the dark porch before finally gathering enough strength to go inside. The silence in the house wrapped around me immediately. I placed the gift bag carefully on the kitchen table and removed the silver watch box from inside. Walter's initials were still engraved beneath the lid in faded script. WRW, 1968. I ran my thumb across the letters slowly. Noah had his grandfather's eyes. The same calm blue. The same gentle way of listening when people spoke. Last Christmas, he sat beside me for nearly an hour while I showed him old photo albums from the 70s. He asked questions about every picture. Vanessa rolled her eyes halfway through and said children should not spend all day listening to boring stories from the past. But Noah stayed anyway. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea even though my stomach felt too tight to drink anything. Outside, rain finally began tapping softly against the kitchen windows. I carried the mug into the living room and sank into Walter's old leather recliner. The room still smelled faintly like cedar and coffee, exactly the way it had before he passed away 3 years earlier. Across from me sat the framed family portrait we took during Noah's 5th birthday. Ethan stood behind me with one hand resting on my shoulder, while Noah grinned proudly between us holding birthday cake frosting on his chin. Vanessa looked flawless, of course. She always did in photographs. Looking at that picture now felt strange, almost dishonest, like staring at actors pretending to be a family instead of people slowly drifting apart. My phone buzzed against the side table around 7:30. For one foolish second, I thought it might be Ethan calling to apologize. Instead, it was a Facebook notification. Someone had tagged me in a video. I opened the app slowly, and there I was on the screen standing frozen in the ballroom, while Vanessa's voice rang clearly through the microphone. Could someone escort this tacky old woman out before she ruins Noah's party? The caption above the video read, "Crazy Grandma crashes private birthday event at Hartford Hills Country Club." Nearly 4,000 views in less than 2 hours. Hundreds of comments. Some defended me. Others laughed. One woman wrote that older people should learn when they are no longer welcome. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. Then I noticed something else buried beneath the noise and cruel jokes. In the corner of the video, almost hidden behind the dessert table, Noah was crying. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan standing near the bar with that blank expression on his face, while strangers filmed me like I was some pathetic sideshow at a carnival. Around 2 in the morning, thunder rolled across Hartford and rain beat heavily against the roof, but even that sound felt distant compared to the noise inside my own thoughts. I finally gave up on sleep and wandered downstairs wrapped in Walter's old gray cardigan. The kitchen clock glowed 2:17 in soft green numbers while the refrigerator hummed quietly in the dark. I opened the refrigerator without thinking and found the lemon cake Noah and I baked together last summer, still tucked in my memory more clearly than yesterday's humiliation. He had accidentally cracked 2 eggs onto the floor and looked terrified Vanessa would yell at him for making a mess. "It is only baking," I told him while we cleaned the tiles together. "Nobody important has ever lived without making a mess." He laughed so hard frosting ended up on his eyebrows. Vanessa arrived halfway through and immediately complained about the sugar content and food coloring. She always had a way of turning small, warm moments cold. Sitting alone at my kitchen table that night, I began thinking about all the things I had ignored over the past few years. Not dramatic moments. Small ones. Quiet ones. The kind people dismiss until they finally connect together like pieces of broken glass. Last Thanksgiving, Vanessa changed the seating arrangement 30 minutes before dinner and placed me at the children's folding table in the sunroom beside two toddlers throwing crackers at each other while her friends occupied the dining room. She smiled sweetly and said she needed the larger chairs for important guests. The previous Easter, she mailed invitations for Noah's school recital to everyone except me, then claimed it must have been lost in the mail when Ethan asked why I did not attend. Even Christmas mornings slowly disappeared from my life. Ethan used to insist we open gifts together before breakfast no matter how old he became. After Vanessa entered the family, holidays became private events with matching pajamas and professional photographs posted online beneath captions about gratitude and family traditions. Traditions that somehow no longer included me. I stood up and walked into the hallway where dozens of framed photographs lined the walls. Ethan at age 10 holding a fishing rod beside Walter at Lake George. Ethan graduating from Boston College while I cried into a paper napkin. Ethan dancing with me at his wedding reception before Vanessa politely interrupted halfway through the song because the photographer wanted couple shots only. I used to believe these changes were normal. Families evolve. Sons grow older. New marriages require compromise. That is what I told myself every time another door quietly closed in my face. But sitting there in the silence before dawn, I realized something painful. Vanessa had not pushed me out all at once. She had done it slowly enough that I questioned my own instincts every single time. The phone rang suddenly at 6:45 sharp, startling me so badly I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. My chest tightened immediately. I answered on the second ring. "Mom," he said, sounding exhausted rather than remorseful. "Things got out of control yesterday." I waited. The rain tapped softly against the windows again. "Vanessa is really upset about the video online," he continued carefully. "People are attacking her in the comments. Not one word about me. Not one apology." I stared out at Walter's rose bushes dripping with rainwater. "Your son cried when they escorted me out," I said quietly. Ethan fell silent for several seconds. "Noah is sensitive," he finally muttered. Sensitive. As if heartbreak in a child could be reduced to a personality trait. Then his voice hardened slightly. "Honestly, Mom, you should have called before showing up. Vanessa spent months planning that party." I closed my eyes slowly. In that moment, I realized my son was no longer trying to protect peace inside the family. He was protecting the image Vanessa built around it. 3 days passed without another call from Ethan. The video continued spreading through local social media pages, passed around by strangers who treated my humiliation like entertainment between recipes and neighborhood gossip. By Friday afternoon, someone had even uploaded a slowed-down version with dramatic music added beneath Vanessa's voice. I stopped checking the comments after reading a thread debating whether I had dementia because I looked confused and disoriented while standing near the ballroom doors. People who had never met me discussed my life over coffee and smartphones while I sat alone in the same kitchen where I once hosted Thanksgiving dinners for 22 relatives every single year. The hardest part was not the public embarrassment. It was the silence afterward. Ethan did not visit. Noah did not call. Even Claire, my daughter, had only sent a short text asking if I was all right before disappearing back into her busy life in Chicago. I told myself everyone was uncomfortable. People avoid pain when they do not know what to say. Still, every hour that passed felt heavier than the last. Friday evening, I decided to clean the upstairs hallway closet simply to keep my mind occupied. Walter used to tease me for reorganizing things whenever I felt anxious. "Some people meditate," he would joke. "You alphabetize." I smiled faintly, remembering his voice, while pulling old storage boxes from the top shelf. Dust floated through the late afternoon sunlight streaming across the hallway floor. Most of the boxes held ordinary things. Christmas ornaments. Old school projects Ethan made in elementary school. A shoebox full of baseball cards Walter collected with Noah before his arthritis became too painful. Then I found a cream-colored envelope tucked beneath a stack of photo albums. My name was written across the front in Walter's handwriting. "Helen." Just that. My chest tightened immediately. I sat down slowly on the hallway floor before opening it. Inside was a folded letter dated 6 months before. Walter died. His handwriting looked weaker than usual, but still careful and deliberate. If you are reading this, the letter began, then I was right to worry. I stopped breathing for a moment. Walter continued by describing several conversations he overheard between Ethan and Vanessa regarding money, property, and what they called future family control. At first, he believed they were simply discussing inheritance planning. But over time, Vanessa's comments became colder, more calculating. Walter wrote that Vanessa repeatedly pressured Ethan to convince us to transfer ownership of the lake property earlier than planned. She also suggested downsizing our house while Walter was still undergoing cardiac treatment because older people become expensive burdens eventually. I pressed one trembling hand against my mouth while reading. Walter admitted he intentionally delayed certain financial decisions because he no longer trusted Vanessa's intentions. Near the end of the letter, one sentence stood out sharply enough to make my stomach twist. Ethan still has a good heart, Walter wrote. But some people confuse love with loyalty and fear with peace. Tears blurred the ink for several seconds. Walter saw this coming long before I did. He noticed the shifts, the manipulation, the quiet isolation happening inside our family while I kept excusing every insult as stress or misunderstanding. At the bottom of the envelope rested a small silver key taped carefully beside another note written in shaky pen. If things ever become difficult, speak to Arthur Bennett before making any decisions. Arthur Bennett had been Walter's attorney and closest friend for nearly 30 years. I had not spoken to him since the funeral. Downstairs, my phone suddenly vibrated across the kitchen counter. Another notification. Another post about the party. But this time the headline made my pulse slow completely. Hartford family influencer faces backlash after viral birthday incident. Family influencer. That was how people knew Vanessa now. Not as a wife. Not as a mother. A brand. An image carefully polished for strangers online. And suddenly, for the first time since the ballroom doors closed behind me, something inside me became very still. Arthur Bennett still worked in the same red brick building downtown where Walter and I signed our first mortgage papers back in 1984. I parked across the street Monday morning and sat inside my car for several minutes watching people hurry past with coffee cups and briefcases while cold October wine scattered leaves along the sidewalk. Hartford looked exactly the same as it always had, but something inside me felt permanently shifted now, like a foundation quietly cracking beneath an old house. Arthur's receptionist recognized me immediately the moment I stepped through the glass doors. Her expression softened with genuine warmth, and I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me that way. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said gently, standing from behind the desk. "Arthur will want to see you right away." His office smelled faintly of leather books and cedarwood polish, exactly as I remembered. Arthur himself looked older, of course, thinner around the shoulders, more silver in his hair. But his eyes sharpened the second he saw Walter's envelope in my hands. "You found the letter," he said quietly. I nodded without speaking. Arthur motioned for me to sit before carefully removing his glasses. Outside his office windows, downtown traffic crawled slowly through the gray morning rain. Walter asked me to prepare for the possibility that things might become difficult after he passed. Arthur admitted after a long silence. At the time, I hoped he was simply being overly cautious. My stomach tightened. What exactly did he suspect? Arthur folded his hands together thoughtfully. He believed Vanessa viewed your family less as relationships and more as assets. The bluntness of the statement almost startled me, even though part of me already knew it was true. Arthur reached into a locked drawer and removed several thick folders stacked neatly together with color-coded tabs. My name appeared across one folder in Walter's handwriting. Another folder bore Noah's name. Arthur opened the first carefully. Walter transferred several protections into place during the final year of his life, he explained. The lake, property, your residence, and Noah's educational trust were all placed under layered legal oversight. I blinked slowly. Educational trust? Arthur nodded. Walter funded a substantial trust for Noah, beginning the year he was born. Private education, college, future investments, medical security. The account currently holds slightly over $2.8 million. I stared at him speechless. Walter never discussed numbers in detail with me. He always preferred simplicity. Security without showing off. Arthur's expression darkened slightly as he slid another document across the desk. Vanessa has attempted to access portions of the trust multiple times during the past 18 months. A cold wave moved through me. Access it for what? Arthur hesitated carefully before answering. Large withdrawals were requested under categories labeled branding development, media consulting, production expenses, and business growth. My fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. Branding. Media. I suddenly pictured Vanessa posing beside expensive floral walls at charity events, while photographers captured carefully edited images for social media accounts filled with inspirational quotes about motherhood and grace. Arthur continued quietly. The requests were denied because Walter made you sole co-trustee alongside this office. No major financial movement can occur without your authorization. I felt almost dizzy hearing those words. Vanessa had spent years slowly convincing me that I was becoming unnecessary inside my own family, while secretly trying to gain control over my grandson's future. Does Ethan know? I asked softly. Arthur looked genuinely uncertain for the first time. I believe Ethan signs documents Vanessa places in front of him without reading carefully. That sounded painfully believable. Ethan always hated conflict. Even as a child, he apologized simply to end arguments faster. Arthur leaned forward slightly. Helen, there is something else. He opened Noah's folder and handed me several printed screenshots taken from public social media pages. Vanessa smiling beside luxury handbags, sponsored resort trips, designer furniture installations, professional photography campaigns. Beneath several posts were captions discussing her success as a motherhood influencer and lifestyle entrepreneur. Arthur tapped the papers lightly. Her public income does not match her spending patterns. Silence settled heavily across the office. Rain streaked slowly down the windows behind him. Walter was afraid of exactly this, Arthur said quietly. Not greed alone. Entitlement. The belief that your family existed to finance an image. I lowered my eyes to the photographs scattered across the desk and suddenly remembered Noah crying near the dessert table while strangers filmed me being escorted from his birthday party. And for the first time since Walter died, I no longer felt confused about what was happening around me. I felt awake. The next morning, I woke before sunrise for the first time in months without feeling helpless. The fear was still there somewhere beneath the surface, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, there was clarity, cold and steady. I stood in the kitchen wearing Walter's cardigan while coffee brewed softly beside the window. And for the first time since the birthday party, I stopped asking myself why Vanessa hated me so much. The answer no longer mattered. What mattered was Noah. At exactly 8:15, I called the financial office that handled the automatic monthly transfers I had quietly continued sending Ethan and Vanessa for years. Mortgage assistance, school activity fees, vacation supplements, emergency spending support. Even after Walter passed away, I kept helping because I believed families should never feel abandoned during difficult seasons. The woman on the phone recognized my account immediately. Mrs. Whitmore, she said warmly, how may I assist you today? I stared out the kitchen window at rainwater dripping from the maple trees lining my backyard. I would like to suspend all discretionary family transfers effective immediately, I said calmly. There was a short pause. All of them? Yes. My voice did not shake. Every recurring payment except Noah's protected educational account. 20 minutes later, I canceled the country club family membership that remained under my trust ownership. Then the vehicle insurance umbrella covering Ethan's luxury SUV lease. Then the supplemental vacation account Walter established years earlier after Ethan's business nearly failed. Piece by piece, I quietly disconnected the invisible support beams holding up the polished life Vanessa displayed online. No announcements, no arguments, no dramatic speeches, just signatures. By noon, my phone began vibrating almost continuously across the kitchen counter. First Ethan, then Vanessa, then Ethan again. I let every call go to voicemail. Around 1:30, a text finally appeared from Vanessa. There must be some mistake with the transfers. No greeting, no concern, just money. I set the phone face down beside my untouched soup bowl and continued reading through Noah's trust documents. Another message arrived 10 minutes later. The country club says our account was frozen during processing. Please call me immediately. Frozen. The word almost made me smile. Not because I enjoyed causing discomfort. Walter taught me better than that. but because for years Vanessa treated my kindness like a utility bill she assumed would always be paid automatically, no matter how cruelly she behaved. Around 3 o'clock, someone knocked sharply on my front door. I already knew who it was before opening it. Vanessa stood on the porch wearing oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy afternoon. Her cream-colored designer coat hung open slightly, and for the first time since I met her 14 years earlier, she looked genuinely unsettled. "What are you doing?" she demanded the second I opened the door. "No hello. No apology." I noticed her eyes immediately scanning the hallway behind me, as though searching for signs of weakness. "Would you like to come inside?" I asked quietly. "No. I would like to know why our accounts are suddenly being blocked." "Our accounts?" I folded my hands calmly together. "They are not your accounts, Vanessa." Her jaw tightened instantly. "Ethan says you are overreacting because of what happened at the party." I said nothing. The silence seemed to frustrate her more than anger would have. "People online are already attacking me," she continued sharply. "Do you understand how damaging this has been for my reputation?" Reputation. Not Noah. Not family. Not humiliation. Reputation. Rain dripped steadily from the porch roof between us. Somewhere down the street, a lawn mower hummed faintly through the damp afternoon air. "You publicly humiliated me in front of my grandson," I said softly. "You had security escort me out while strangers filmed it." Vanessa crossed her arms immediately. "You were making Noah uncomfortable." The lie landed so smoothly from her mouth, it almost sounded rehearsed. I looked at her carefully then. Really looked at her. Perfect hair. Perfect coat. Perfect posture. Everything curated. Everything controlled. But underneath the polish, I finally saw something Walter recognized years earlier. Panic. Not because she hurt me. Because she feared losing control. "I saw the video," I said quietly. Noah was crying. For the first time, Vanessa looked away. Only briefly, but long enough. Then her expression hardened again. Children cry over everything. Something inside me settled permanently at that moment. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Finality. I opened the front door slightly wider and stepped aside. "You should leave now, Vanessa." Her eyes widened as if she genuinely could not believe anyone would dismiss her. "Excuse me." "You heard me." My voice remained calm enough to almost sound gentle. "And one more thing. Do not ever mistake access for ownership again." She stared at me for several long seconds before turning sharply toward the driveway. I watched her walk back to the white Range Rover parked crookedly near the curb while cold wind scattered wet leaves across the porch steps. Then I closed the door softly behind her and locked it. By Wednesday morning, the silence from Ethan had transformed into something heavier than anger. It felt strategic, deliberate. He no longer called to argue or defend Vanessa. Instead, short formal emails began arriving from his assistant requesting meetings regarding family financial restructuring. I read each message carefully at my dining room table, while soft jazz played from the old radio Walter restored years ago. The language sounded cold and corporate, as if I were no longer his mother, but an inconvenient business obstacle requiring management. Around noon, Claire finally called from Chicago. "I saw the article," she said immediately without greeting. "Helen, what the hell is happening over there?" I closed my eyes briefly at the sound of someone speaking honestly for once. Outside the kitchen window, gray clouds hung low over the neighborhood, while wind rattled the last autumn leaves across my backyard patio. "Your brother believes I embarrassed his wife?" I answered quietly. Claire let out a sharp breath. "No. Ethan believes whatever keeps his life easier." That sentence sat heavily between us. Claire always understood people more clearly than Ethan did. Even as children, she noticed tension before anyone else admitted it existed. "There is more going on," I said carefully. "Much more." I told her about Walter's letter, about the trust, about Vanessa attempting to access Noah's educational funds. Silence filled the line for several seconds afterward. Then Claire whispered something that made my stomach tighten instantly. "Helen, I need to tell you something too." I gripped the phone harder. "Last month," Claire continued slowly, "Vanessa invited me to a charity event in Manhattan. Some influencer fundraiser thing. She got drunk near the end of the night and started bragging to one of her friends about how she would never have to worry about money again once certain old family assets were fully transferred." My pulse slowed painfully. Did she mention specifics? No names. But she laughed and said older people become easier to manipulate when they are lonely. I stared at the rain streaking down the windows while Claire's words echoed through my chest. Easier to manipulate when they are lonely. Walter was right all along. Vanessa had never viewed isolation as unfortunate. She viewed it as useful. Claire exhaled heavily into the phone. Helen, please tell me you are protecting yourself legally. Arthur is helping me. Good, she replied immediately. Because Ethan has no idea who he married. After we hung up, I walked slowly into Walter's study, carrying my coffee mug in both hands. The room remained exactly the way he left it. Brown leather chair near the fireplace. Reading glasses folded neatly atop a stack of financial journals. The faint smell of sandalwood aftershave lingering in the wood shelves. I sat at his desk and opened the lower drawer where he kept personal files. Most contained ordinary things. Insurance papers, property taxes, old handwritten birthday cards from Noah. Then near the back, I found a slim black folder labeled Hartford Hope Foundation, Vanessa's charity organization. I frowned slightly before opening it. Inside were printed bank summaries, sponsorship agreements, and donation reports. Walter must have been reviewing them before he died. At first glance, the numbers looked ordinary enough. But the deeper I read, the stranger things became. Large donations entered the foundation account, then vanished into consulting expenses, branding partnerships, and event management costs tied directly to Vanessa's media company. One expense alone listed $48,000 for digital lifestyle expansion. Another showed luxury travel accommodations billed as community outreach development. My chest tightened slowly. This was not charity. It was image financing disguised as philanthropy. Suddenly, my phone vibrated again across the desk. A text from Ethan. We need to talk Friday night. Vanessa is hosting a donor appreciation dinner at the house. Important people will be there. Please do not create unnecessary tension. I read the message twice before setting the phone down carefully beside Walter's glasses. Important people. The phrase almost made me laugh. After everything that happened, my son still worried more about appearances than truth. But then I noticed something attached beneath the text. A digital invitation flyer for Vanessa's event. Elegant gold lettering stretched across the screen beside a photograph of Vanessa smiling beneath crystal chandeliers. Hartford Hope Foundation Annual Community Leadership Gala. Benefiting children's educational futures. I stared at those last 3 words for a very long time. Then I reached for the black folder again and quietly began organizing every document Walter left behind. Friday evening. Arrived cold and windy. The kind of late October night where the air smells faintly like rain and chimney smoke. I stood in my bedroom adjusting the pearl earrings Walter bought me 20 years earlier while soft jazz drifted through the downstairs hallway. For several minutes, I studied my reflection carefully in the mirror above the dresser. The woman staring back at me looked older than she had a month ago. Sharper somehow. Less uncertain. I chose a dark navy dress with long sleeves and low heels comfortable enough for standing. Nothing dramatic. Nothing expensive. Vanessa always underestimated quiet women. Arthur arrived precisely at 6:30 carrying 2 leather folders beneath his arm. He wore a charcoal overcoat and looked more serious than I had ever seen him. Are you certain you want to do this tonight? He asked softly as we drove toward Ethan's house through the glowing streets of West Hartford. Storefront windows shimmered beneath strings of white lights, while restaurants filled with couples escaping the cold. I watched raindrops slide slowly across the passenger window. No, I answered honestly. But I should have stopped being afraid a long time ago. Ethan's house sat at the top of a winding private lane lined with lanterns and imported maple trees Vanessa insisted on planting 2 years earlier for curb appeal. Luxury cars already crowded the circular driveway when we arrived. Through the massive front windows, I could see servers carrying silver trays beneath crystal chandeliers, while guests in tailored suits mingled around floral arrangements taller than most children. Everything about the evening looked designed for photographs rather than human connection. The moment Arthur and I entered the foyer, conversations visibly shifted around us. I recognized several local business owners, 2 city council members, and at least 3 women frequently featured beside Vanessa in charity magazines. Their smiles tightened immediately upon seeing me. Vanessa herself stood near the staircase wearing a fitted black gown with gold jewelry glittering beneath the lights. For one brief second, genuine panic crossed her face before the performance returned. Helen, she said brightly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I did not realize you were attending. I handed my coat to a silent waiter. Your invitation said family was welcome. Her smile barely moved. Of course. Across the room, Ethan approached looking pale and exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes like bruises from sleepless nights. Mom, he said quietly, glancing uneasily toward Arthur. What is this? Arthur answered before I could. Professional oversight. Ethan's expression tightened immediately. Before he could respond, Vanessa clinked a champagne spoon lightly against her crystal glass. The room gradually quieted. Thank you all for joining us tonight, she announced gracefully. Hartford Hope Foundation exists to protect educational opportunities for children who deserve brighter futures. I watched several guests nod approvingly while servers distributed champagne. Vanessa moved through the speech smoothly, effortlessly, like someone rehearsing lines she no longer believed but knew audiences wanted to hear. Then she smiled toward Noah, standing near the fireplace in a tiny navy blazer. Everything I do, she continued warmly, is for the next generation. Arthur opened his folder beside me without speaking. My pulse slowed completely. Actually, I said softly into the sudden silence, that is exactly what we need to discuss. Vanessa's smile froze instantly. Conversation stopped again across the room. Ethan looked back and forth between us with growing confusion. Arthur stepped forward calmly. Several financial irregularities connected to Hartford Hope Foundation and the Noah Whitmore Educational Trust have recently been reviewed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop all at once. Vanessa laughed sharply. I think this is neither the time nor place for legal confusion. Arthur continued as if she had not spoken. Over the past 18 months, multiple attempts were made to redirect protected trust assets into branding companies and media partnerships connected directly to Mrs. Vanessa Whitmore. Gasps rippled quietly through the guests. Ethan turned slowly toward his wife. What is he talking about? Vanessa's composure cracked for the first time. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Those were standard development reimbursements. Arthur calmly removed several printed documents and placed them onto the marble entry table beneath the chandelier light. $48,000 in luxury travel billed as educational outreach. $32,000 in image consulting. $17,000 in designer staging categorized as community engagement. Ethan stared at the papers like he could not process the numbers. Vanessa, he whispered. Noah looked frightened near the fireplace now, clutching the sleeve of his blazer while guests exchanged stunned glances around the room. Then Arthur removed one final document. Additionally, he said evenly, all access requests to Noah's trust were blocked because Mrs. Helen Whitmore remains primary co-trustee under Walter Whitmore's protected estate structure. Silence swallowed the room whole. Vanessa's face drained completely of color, and suddenly every polished thing around her looked fragile. No one moved for several seconds after Arthur finished speaking. The only sound inside the enormous dining room came from the soft clink of melting ice against untouched champagne glasses. Vanessa stood frozen near the staircase with one hand gripping the stem of her glass, so tightly I thought it might shatter from pressure alone. Across the room, people who had spent years praising her charity work suddenly avoided looking directly at her. I watched the shift happen in real time. Admiration turning into discomfort. Discomfort turning into distance. Ethan looked physically ill. He picked up one of the financial reports from the marble table and stared at it, as though reading a foreign language. These numbers cannot be right, he whispered. Arthur remained calm beside me. They have already been verified through independent review. Vanessa finally snapped back to life then. This is absurd, she said sharply, her voice cracking around the edges. You are trying to humiliate me because of some misunderstanding over family finances. Family finances. The phrase almost sounded laughable now. Ethan slowly lifted his eyes toward her. You told me the foundation barely covered operating costs. Vanessa immediately turned toward him. Because it does not. These are standard business reallocations. You used Noah's trust requests to support your media company, Arthur said evenly. The records are very clear. Several guests quietly set down their glasses. One couple near the fireplace exchanged a look before slipping toward the front door without saying goodbye. Vanessa noticed immediately. Panic flashed across her face again. Not guilt. Exposure. She took one shaky breath before forcing her posture straighter. Helen planned this, she said suddenly, pointing toward me. Ever since that ridiculous birthday incident, she has wanted revenge. The room fell silent again. I looked at her calmly for a long moment. Then I glanced toward Noah standing alone beside the fireplace, clutching the sleeve of his tiny blazer. You had security remove me from my grandson's birthday party while people filmed it for entertainment, I said quietly. And even after all of this, you still believe the problem is my reaction. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan interrupted first. Did you really try to access Noah's trust? His voice sounded smaller now, younger somehow. Vanessa hesitated 1 second too long. That was all it took. Ethan lowered himself slowly into a dining chair like his legs could no longer support him properly. I recognized that expression immediately. It was the same look he wore at 14 after learning Walter had to refinance the house during a difficult business year. Shock mixed with shame. I trusted you, he whispered. Vanessa's face hardened instantly. Everything I did was for this family. No, I said softly. Everything you did was for the image of this family. She looked at me with open hatred then. The carefully polished social smile was completely gone now. You always judged me, she hissed quietly enough that only nearby guests could hear. Because I wanted more than your sad little small-town life. I almost felt sorry for her in that moment. Not because she lost money or influence, but because after all these years, she still believed love and status were the same thing. Noah suddenly crossed the room before anyone noticed him moving. He walked directly toward me and wrapped his small arms around my waist exactly the same way he had at the birthday party before Vanessa pulled him away. Grandma, he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Are you leaving again? The entire room seemed to hold its breath waiting for my answer. I rested one hand gently against the back of his head and closed my eyes briefly. He still smelled faintly like birthday cake frosting and the cedar soap Ethan used when he was little. Not tonight, sweetheart, I said quietly. Ethan looked up at me then with tears standing visibly in his eyes for the first time all evening. Mom, he began weakly. I did not know. That hurt almost more than betrayal itself. Because part of me believed him. Ethan had not become cruel the way Vanessa had. He had become passive, comfortable, willing to ignore obvious things as long as they protected the life he wanted to believe was real. I studied my son carefully beneath the chandelier light, and suddenly saw how exhausted he truly looked. Years of avoiding conflict had hollowed something out inside him. But understanding his weakness no longer required me to carry its consequences. I gently smoothed Noah's hair before stepping back toward Arthur. Around us, guests quietly gathered coats and handbags while whispers spread across the room like cold wine through dry leaves. Vanessa stood completely alone near the staircase now, abandoned by the same audience she spent years trying to impress. I picked up my coat slowly from the entry chair and turned toward the front door. Ethan rose halfway from his seat. Mom, please. I paused only long enough to look back once. The cruelest people always mistake kindness for weakness, I said softly. Then I walked out into the cold October night with Noah's silver pocket watch still resting safely inside my purse.